We're headquartered in Indonesia today. We've been around since 1966. We first did our project in Indonesia in the 1970s, which was nickel at the time. And our clients today are some of the very smallest, mum and dad with maybe 1 million tonnes of coal, through to the very biggest in the world. And we work across exploration through to project development and operations. We have debt-laden companies in Indonesia that are ramping up production and driving down price in themselves because they need revenue. And the coal prices are poised to extend their decline. So it's all doom and gloom. But if you have a historical perspective that helps put that into context and see, is that all real or not? And the first thing people go to is, as we said, coal prices declined from $130 as it was back in 2011, and everyone was buying Lamborghinis and life was great. And it's now $96 and times are tough. So we've had a 26% decline. But if we step back a little bit and look at 2008 to 2013, it's still a pretty gloomy picture. You know, we had a punctuation there in 2009 where people were panicking, but it came back. So some people today are sitting around going, I hope it comes back. I pray it comes back. But if we step back a little bit and look at 2003 to now, the coal price has actually gone up by a factor of 4. So if your share price had done that, or if you were selling computers at your shop or whatever you were selling, if you said in the last 10 years the price I could sell at has gone up by a factor of 4, you'd be pretty happy. Yet all we hear is doom and gloom. And if we step back to, this is the length of my career, it's a very different picture. That declining real commodity prices were the absolute norm. This is what we lived with, and this was considered by learned economists to be the fate of any commodity, to enter a stage in its life when declining prices are the norm. So what this meant practically is that no matter how smart we had been to date, we had to assume that as our mind matured, as our physicals got worse, we had to be smarter every single year and every single year after that. But then 2004 happened and the price boomed. We stopped having to be smart about it. So if I look at the cost, you say, okay, fine, the price has gone up, but costs have gone through the roof, is what people talk about. What I've done here is take a mine we're working on today in Indonesia and take its physicals, so the cubic metres of waste it moves, the tonnes of coal, the haul distance, everything is the same, transport it back in time to 2003 and use the same costs from a real mine in Indonesia in 2003. And at that point, the cost would have been $31 a tonne, and the benchmark price, so this is 6,300 kilocalorie coal, the rocket fuel we'd love to have today, was $28 a tonne. Not the $90 that we're hearing and complaining about, but $28. This mine would have been losing money, as most mines were at that time. And everything we were doing there was about achieving step change in productivity, moving from 250-tonne excavators and 100-tonne trucks to something different. But if we fast forward to 2013, we're still using 250-tonne trucks and 100-tonne excavators in most mines, but the cost today would only be $54. So there's been a substantial increase, near doubling, but the coal price has quadrupled. So it would have gone from a mine struggling to a mine making good money. So something else has happened that people are complaining about. It isn't about the coal price and it isn't about the costs. So this one here is just the biggest single driver of our cost is petroleum price. Often this tracks coal for reasons that are never fully explained. Lots of people write learned papers on it, but no one's fully ever explained it. But what's happened recently, it has decoupled. But still, It's not about the costs and it's not about the price. The other thing that's happened, the production in Indonesia has exploded, and worldwide. So we've gone from back here where our point is, 2003, at just around about 120 million tonnes to today just under 400 million tonnes. So what it tells you is that 70% of Indonesia's coal production has only ever known a rising market. Only 30% existed in that time of declining real prices and has the skill set to deal with it. It also, the other interesting thing is, back when I graduated, back here, we would say a senior mining engineer had 10 years experience. Your chief mining engineer had 20 years. Your general manager, 30 years. And ahead of them were people with 40 and 50 years experience mentoring, who learnt off people who had 40 and 50 years experience before them. On that graph, it's not possible. These people today, who started then with 10 years of experience, are surrounded by inexperienced people. So management experience today is not what it was 10 years ago. The other thing that's happened is the calorific value. So this is how much energy you get out. And ultimately in a thermal coal, you're selling energy. Back before 1990, it was accepted that you could not sell coal with 20% moisture and 5,100 kilocalories. It was just not a saleable product. Newlands coal mine in Queensland struggled to sell a 12% ash coal. It struggled in that market for many, many years. But Adaro came along and established the market for 5,100. And that stayed that way through to the early 2000s. The people accepted that as the floor, and no one would buy less than 5,000. But then, coupled with the increased demand, people started to buy, and people then started to sell, ever-decreasing quality of coal. So recently, I'm not sure about today precisely, but within the last 12 months, people were shipping coals at around as low as 2,600. That 10 years ago was not saleable, 20 years ago would have been called crazy, 30 years ago you would have maybe taken it and used it on your garden for potting mix, if you were lucky. And what that's meant is the realised price, the range of prices. Back in 1983 we were getting sort of high $30 a tonne for coal, but it was 7,000 kilocalorie. Now, we have tracked that bottom has stayed pretty much constant over that 30 years, except for a couple of real peaks of booms. When things were a little crazy, tightness, we bring more capacity on, the bottom comes out of the price, we bring worse coals on, tightness comes out. So we have tracked that bottom end. Now remember where that price was. If you had the mine that's price was up here and still producing that coal and getting this price, you should be making money. But if you'd gone and opened one of these, you're going to be doing it tough. So what I'd like to do in the rest of today is try and give you a vocabulary and give you some information to try and decide when something's presented, have you got one of these or have you got one of these? And it's really important. So, it means that not all coal projects are created equal. You have good ones, you have bad ones. Not all management teams are created equal. 10 years experience just isn't enough. An understanding of a wide range of variables is required to correctly assess a project's viability. It's not just calorific value, it's not just strip ratio, it's a lot of different things. So again, 10 years is not really enough to understand.
Notice in your presentation you mentioned that most of the coal in Indonesia is not really high calorific value. So I'd like to try and understand better on low calorific value in Indonesia. Is there still a case for low calorific value coal to be exported to India especially? I understand that some of the coal miners are doing good business in that. versus high calorific value coal. In fact, I think the case is that a lot of them are saying that prices of low calorific value coal is more stable because it's not subjected to the kind of prices that are used for steel. So that's the first question. Then maybe I'll ask the second question after that.
Yes, I'll give you the opportunity.
We're seeing a lot of demand for the low-calorie coal, but you have to make a distinction in low-calorie. So the most demand is for what I call the high-rank low-calorie coal, and that's 4,000, 4,200 GAR, 5,300, 5,600 ADB, 36, 30, 35, 38% moisture. There's huge demand for that because they can take that directly, blend it into their, they blend this calorie, which is kind of high moisture, 38%, low ash, with the Indian coal, which is kind of crap coal, but it's high ash, low moisture. So they get this very low rank, middle ash and middle moisture, and then it's cheap. And that's why they're importing so much of this. I mean, literally they're going to import 100, 150 million tons of this stuff, and they need to import this stuff because it's cheap. Now, one thing you have to do when you look at this 4,200 or 4,000 GAR is you have to make sure the stripping ratio is low, 3 to 1 or 4 to 1, and the infrastructure is very low cost. Because if you don't have low cost infrastructure, you'll never get it out and make a margin. And the second point you want to make sure is that the sulfur is, usually if it's 1% or below, people say that's good, but for this sulfur, it's being blended. So you need to be, Indian coal is also high sulfur, so you want to have a 0.6% or below. So there are a couple of things that you need to be careful. There is high demand for low-rank coal, but you need to be much more careful on the cost of taking it out, stripping ratio, sulfur, ash, and moisture. So, but the 4,000, 4,200, there's a tremendous demand for that. You just need to be a low-cost operator.
Okay. Second question.
Okay, thank you for that. Second question is, I've seen some people who claim they have technologies to upgrade the calorific value of coal. I wonder whether the panel has had experience with this and whether such technologies are real and viable.
Keith.
An interesting question. There's certainly a long list of people who claim to have a technology. And there's certainly no doubt it is possible to remove the moisture from coal. It's all a matter of what comes next. And a lot of these technologies produce something that's very dusty and very friable and can't be transported to market. Okay.
Did you say dusty and friable?
Friable. It breaks up. It just, every time you touch it, it falls apart. So it's not much use to anyone. So there are technologies that then will bind that and make it into something that supposedly can be shipped. But they cost so much money that the amount of money you've spent to do it is less than the gain you get in price. So they're not economic. So there are technologies that work, but they're not economic. There are technologies that don't work. So there are technologies that work at pilot scale, and that's a lot of the things you'll see. But they have failed at the step to production. Recently, there are two out there at the moment that are interesting, and that's the level they're at, is interesting. And what they have in common is that their commercial production is at about 100,000 tonne per annum, which is about the scale of previous generations' pilot plants. So, and all they're saying is to get to 1 million tonne, we just do 10. And two technologies, one in New Zealand, one in China, that have that in common. So interesting, but not yet.
We've looked at 9 technologies in that area, and I think 3 years from now or 4 years from now it will happen, but which technology they're going to use, no idea.